Well, hello everybody and welcome back to another video. So this week, as you can see, I'm office based. The reason for that is I've recently had an operation and I've just got 3 more weeks to recuperate before I can get out and about with the camera. It seems operations are a bit of a thing with me. If you remember about 2 years ago, if you followed the channel regularly, you'll know that I was in hospital for 2, maybe even 3 hernia operations. I've lost count, but this recent trip was not related to those, but I'll not go into the details, but I am on the mend and I should be back in action fairly soon. So with that opportunity in mind, I'm going to do this processing video today, and it's something that I do get asked for quite a bit, but it's not something that I tend to lean towards because I think there's far better people out there at processing than me. I just tend to push sliders around and just keep moving them around until I get what I want. But like I say, I do get asked for them quite a lot, so I must be doing something right. What I will say is that I've been using Photoshop and Lightroom since the day that they first started, so I have got some history with them and I have evolved with them as they've changed. But like I say, I don't pretend to be an expert in using it, and if there's anything that I do today that you think there's an easier way, please let me know in the comments below. So the image that I'm going to process is this one that you see on screen now, and if you watch my last video, I'll put a link to that above. You will know that this was a fantastic day in the Lake District. I had some amazing conditions, and this was the image at the end of the day. I was really quite chuffed with this. Not the sort of conditions that you expect every time you go out by a long shot. Now, there's a bit of a backstory to this shot in that the version that I put on YouTube was not my first processed version. What actually happened was that I dashed home, downloaded the card and processed it within about half an hour of getting home. I then did the video, edited it, uploaded it to YouTube, and there it sat for a couple of days. Now in the interim time, I went back and processed it again, and I actually preferred the new version, which is absolutely typical considering all the effort that goes into uploading a film on YouTube. I put the image to a couple of friends and they agreed unanimously that the new version was better than the original version, and that's what you see here. So I'm going to show you the original process version now, which is what's on screen here. You can see it lacks the punch of the one that I put on YouTube, a lot more muted by comparison, but still a nice image nonetheless. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of people watching this right now that are thinking, I actually prefer that version, and that's fine. I absolutely accept that, but I prefer the other one, and I'll put them both on screen so you can see them. Just go into the library module and press the X and Y, press the lights out, and there you can see both images side by side. One on the right is the YouTube one, the one that I finally went for. The one on the left was my first process version. Like I say, not a huge amount in it, but there's enough as far as I'm concerned for me to prefer the one on the right hand side. Now, what I'm going to do, which is going to be really interesting, is I'm going to process this one, which is, we're back on the raw file. Snip into the develop module. That was where this raw file started off life, and I will just quickly flick back to the final version so you can see them side by side there. Raw file here, final version, and then the original version. So as you can see, a very flat image. So let's dive in to the develop module, and I'll start with the basic panel, and I'm going to go with the blacks first of all. And if I hold my Alt key down, press on that little button there, and then move it to the left, you can see in the histogram at the top that the histogram's moving towards the edge of the frame, and there it touches and it just starts to clip. So I'm going to pull that back ever so slightly. Now the whites, I'm going to move over to the right. Now it's clipping there quite a bit, but that's in that bright spot of the sky, which I'm going to bring back with a radial filter because I want the rest of the image to be a little bit brighter. So that's that done. But before I add the radial filter, I'm just going to go to the tone curve, and I'm just going to put a nice little S into that just to add a bit of contrast. That's looking nice. So let's go back to the basic panel And up here we've got the radial filter, which I can select there, and I'm just going to pull that down over this entire section here, and I'm just going to reduce the highlights. And if you look from the starting point there in the histogram, the little blue triangle, bring it down, it then gets rid of that clipping. And I'm just going to take the exposure down just a tad as well. So there we've got quite a bit of mood brought into the scene already. So one of the things that was really apparent to me when I was photographing this that I didn't get right on my first process was the transition between the blue shadow, the shadow areas here, which have a much more blue and cold appearance, and then the warmth on this left hand side. So I'm going to select another filter, a linear gradient filter, and I'm going to bring that over this entire left hand side, about there. Just bring that up a bit, and I'm just going to take the temperature down in that area just to cool it off ever so slightly. That's nice. It's really nice. And I'm just going to lift the exposure up ever so slightly and just add a bit of contrast in. Now similarly, I'm going to select another linear gradient, and I'm going to do the entire opposite on this side. And I'm going to warm that up ever so slightly, only a slight amount, and you're just going to increase the saturation just to make that bracken really pop. So close that down. Now I'm going to selectively adjust the colour of the bracken. I'm going to do that with the colour mixer, and I'm going to use this little selection tool here, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to increase the saturation just to bring that up. But I'm also going to select the luminance as well, just to bring it up a little bit, just to bring that brightness up. That's looking much nicer. Now I do think that this area lacks, this bottom right hand side lacks a bit of life, and one of the things I wanted to bring out originally, which was definitely apparent at the time, was these greens had a bit more pop to them. So I'm going to do the same again here, and I'm going to select this green, and I'm just going to lift it up ever so slightly, and then I'm going to go to saturation, and I'm going to do the same there. Knock it back a little bit. If I go too far, obviously it goes that horrible funny weird colour, the aqua, and that's just helped to bring those greens out as well. And what it's done, it's had a bit of an effect on the other areas as well. So I'll turn that off, and that's not really a million miles away from where I want it to be. And generally what I do at this point is I go away and with the first process aside, I generally go away and have a little break from it, and then come back to it and see what I think, if it needs anything else. That's the lights out there. I think what it does need, I think it needs a bit more contrast to the overall scene, and you've got to be careful with that, because of course this is an image that's got lots of fog in it. So I'm going to add contrast purely as a trial at this point, I think, and just bring that up. And I always find it helps to go to the extreme and then bring it back, and I definitely think that makes a difference. I just go to the history there, and I'll just bring that back and then flick it back up again. So what it's really had an effect on the image, but what it has done as well, it's took a lot of the atmosphere out, the fog, which I'm not really a fan of. So I'm going to knock that back, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add that contrast with another linear gradient. So because I don't want it to affect the fog and just the foreground, I'm going to do it just on this bottom part only, and just increase the exposure ever so slightly as well. and then just the saturation ever so slightly. And then as a finishing point, I go in close and just reduce the clarity, add a little bit of dehaze, and I think I'm there. I think I'm where I want to be. For the lights out again, let's have a look at that. I think that looks really quite nice. So the real test will be to see how that compares with the other two images. So firstly was my first process. I think it's an improvement on that. Go back to the new one. And my YouTube video process, which I now think has got a little bit too much saturation. I actually think I prefer the new one, although I will, having looked at it, I do prefer that coolness in the fog. So I'm going to take another linear gradient, and I'm just going to knock that temperature back ever so slightly. So let's have a look at that now compared to the first one. Yeah, I really do prefer that, I think. Now then, something I've been playing around with are these in the calibration tool, and just using these saturation sliders. And again, it pays to go right to the end and then knock it back. I think there's definitely some improvements on the reds there. Again, with the greens, too much, knock it back. And then the blues, yeah, take that right back to about there. Now as I look at it, I am still thinking that the light in this middle area here is still just a bit too dominating, so I'm going to go back to my original radial gradient and just knock those whites back and the exposure back just that little bit more. I think now that's allowing me to look into the scene rather than being directed to that bright spot at the top. I'm really quite happy with that actually. So let's look at the original YouTube video. A little bit too blue in my opinion, and that one is a little bit more realistic. And then we've got the original processed version, where you can see that spot of fog is really quite bright in the middle there. I'm just going to pull that back a little bit further, take it back out just a little bit brighter. I think about there is better. And there we have the finished article. Now, one last step that I'm going to do is I'm going to take this into Photoshop and sharpen it. I know a lot of you have commented on the sharpness of my images, so I'll just quickly show you how I do that. It's very, very simple and straightforward. So edit in Photoshop. And there we go. Just let me get rid of that. Straight into Photoshop. So here we go in Photoshop. I'll go to 100%. In the layers palette, Command J or Control J if you're on a PC, and I'm going to go to Filter, High Pass Filter, and this radius here I'm just going to move up until literally I can just see branches and bark coming through the image. I think probably just take it back to about 1.7, 1.8, something like that. And then in this palette here, I'm just going to go to Soft Light, and if I turn it off and then turn it back on, you can see it just pops that little bit there on the bark, makes it look a little bit sharper. Doesn't really affect too much the background sharpness. There's enough fog for me to get away with that. If the fog was quite light and I was losing the fog effect, what I would do is I would create a layer mask on this layer, and then I will paint the sharpness into just the trees. But I do have a video on that, which I'll put a link above if you want to see how that's done. But that's really turned out to be quite a nice image. And now we'll just go on to full page, full screen, and yeah, really quite happy with that. And then my last step, which I'll show you for YouTube, is to image size, and I always size my images for YouTube to 4000 along the longest edge. Fit screen, and there we go. If I go to that again now, you can see that's lovely and crisp, really nice. And if I just move that around off to the left hand side so it fills the frame, move the hand out of the way. Really quite happy with that. The greens on the right are popping nicely, they don't look too unnatural at all really. I'm happy with those, they look as they should do. And the bracken is exactly as it should be. Nothing is overly obvious in that scene, which I felt that on the YouTube version was maybe just getting into the realms of that ever so slightly. And whereas I feel now that I've got somewhere in between the two. So again, there's my YouTube video. There's my first process. And that's today's process. Really quite happy with that, and that's the one that I'm going to stick with. And I promise you, I am not going to reprocess this again. It's too stressful, to be honest. So that concludes this video. I will put all 3 images on at the end. Before you go, just to say, in terms of the videos doing better on YouTube, please give me a big thumbs up. It really helps the channel. Obviously subscribe if you've enjoyed what you've seen, and ring the bell for notifications. Leave some comments below, let me know what you think of those 3 images. Now if you want to support the channel more, there's always the YouTube membership and also Patreon membership, which starts from as little as 99p per month. But having said that, if you give this video a thumbs up, that goes a long way to getting this video recognised in the YouTube algorithm. Lastly, I have places left on my 2024 workshops. You can find those available at www.simonboothphotography.com/workshops and get yourself booked on one of those. There's 2 types. There's one for the bigger landscapes and vistas, and there's also one for intimate scenes, intimate landscapes and close-ups, macro, things like that, all taking place in the Lake District National Park. So I will leave it there, say thank you all so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.